Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be moderating the panel discussion that's leading this session off. My name, as Fred said, is Pam Drockney. I'm the General Manager with the Manitoba Wheat and Barley Growers Association. And here we have, to start us off, our three leaders in the ag industry. We have Cam Daul, who's the President of Cereals Canada, JoAnne Buth, who's the CEO of the Canadian International Grains Institute, and we have with us as well as Pattie Miller, who's the Chief Commissioner with the Canadian Grains Commission. So this will be a panel discussion. We'll all kind of open up with the first kind of question, but I encourage you to have your questions prepared, to ask them, to have any of those burning questions that you have from any one of these three organizations that you want to have your question answered. But to kind of start us off, maybe I'll get each of you, and whoever has, Cam has the mic first, so he lost the scissors, rock, paper. I'll just get you guys each to introduce yourself, I kind of already did that, but what your organization does, just in a quick little snapshot.
Sure, thanks, Pam. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Cereals Canada, we're a value chain organization that has membership from farmers across Canada, from the Atlantic Grains Council through the BC grain producers, as well as exporters and processors and the crop development and seed companies.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm JoAnne Buth. I'm the CEO at the Canadian International Grains Institute, most often referred to as CIGI. And CIGI is members and funders are the grain companies and the growers from each of the three prairie provinces. So thank you very much for your support to the CIGI programs. We provide market and customer support for customers that buy Canadian wheat. So we run programs at CIGI bringing millers, bakers, noodle makers, pasta makers in so that we can demonstrate and work with them so that they can use CWS, Quad, CPS to the very best of their ability. And we also run programs within their countries as well. And we're one of the key partners, along with my comrades here, compadres, that run the new crop missions, where every year we go out to 17, 18 different countries around the world, tell them about the quality of Canadian wheat. So we're kind of the market support, customer support arm of the wheat side.
Hi everyone. I certainly hope you know what the Canadian Grain Commission does, but if not, we are a federal government department. We regulate the grain industry. We set and maintain grain standards for quality, and we regulate the grain handling system to ensure integrity in grain transactions. So really pleased to be here with you today.
So maybe I'll take the opportunity to kind of start with the opening question. And as you'll see up on the slide behind us, the title of this session is called Canada's Opportunities and Challenges in the International Wheat Market. So in the spirit of, the panel's title, the question that I'll pose to each of you, so each of you take a turn, is, in your opinion, what is the biggest challenge facing Canadian wheat producers over the next 5 years?
I think the biggest challenge that is facing our industry is that increased scrutiny of what happens on your farm. So there's increased scrutiny around things like Daul, which of course is produced by the Fusarium fungus, ochratoxin A, which is a storage fungus, pesticide residues. And at the same time, we're seeing this growing protectionism. So countries are using sanitary and phytosanitary measures to block trade and have this. We have an incredible ability to test for things now. So what happens on your farm matters in international marketplaces, and I think that is only going to grow over time.
So I think one of the biggest challenges that Canadian farmers are facing is competition from other countries. If you take a look at increased wheat production in Russia and Ukraine at over 100 million tons now, and they're exporting 50 million tons of that really wasn't on the market. you know, in the last 10, 12 years. And so as we talk to customers around the world, they tell us that CWRS is the best wheat, and it's used for blending. And they will blend it with other competitor country wheats like HRW wheat in the US or from Russia and the Black Sea region. And that's one of the things that we need to ensure, that our wheat varieties are the very best in terms of quality so that we can maintain those markets. But we are going to face increased competition. We had a team out to Russia and Ukraine to determine where they're at in terms of plant breeding, because we were hearing from customers that they were seeing improved quality and consistency in the Black Sea and Russia wheat. So it's something that's really important in terms of maintaining the quality of the Canadian wheat that we have. And that's done through the variety breeding system from the breeders, and also through the class system with the CGC.
It's an interesting question. You know, thinking about it, what are the biggest challenges facing wheat farmers? Are they any different than the ones that have been historically there? The environment, the weather, prices, getting your grain to market on time. So when I thought about this in today's context, I think about what it is to be a reliable supplier, and what we really need to pay attention to over the next 5 years. And if you think about the complexity of the grain system, right, from seed development through to what the customer eats, there's an incredible amount of interactions along that system to get it from one place to the other. And today and going forward, there's more and more complexity, there's more science being applied, there's a need for speed. The technology is changing all around us. So I think in the next 5 years, we all really need to be paying attention to all of those relationships along the supply chain. You know, as Cam said, customers paying attention to phytosanitary barriers to trade, whether they're science-based or not, we need to be able to respond quickly, and we need to be able to respond as an industry. And so that's going to take a lot of education. It's going to take a lot of conversations as our system continues to evolve.
Maybe at this time I'll open up the floor. Are there any questions for any one of our panelists up here? Don't be scared. Oh, there's one there.
What prospects do you see for super grades of grain? That is the very best kernels from, say, number 1.
Can't hear you, George.
What prospects do you see for super grades of grain that is better than number 1?
Super grades. You don't talk about super grades? I don't even.
This isn't going to be an answer to your question because I'm not a marketer. But if you want to talk about the nature of today's grading versus increased diversification in the market and different customers' demands for maybe specifications that fall outside of our grading system, there's certainly the ability in the market for people to do that. So as different quality attributes are uncovered or demanded by customers, I think Canada's in a good position to respond. The challenge in our system is, you know, we've got a system where we have to move large quantities of grain really quickly to market. And we've done that by classifying wheat in certain quality groups. But as we get science that identifies certain quality characteristics, and the industry can measure those characteristics cheaply and fast and in a reproducible way, then I think the entire system will be able to evolve and respond to those kinds of market demands.
Maybe just a comment from the customer's point of view. We will get inquiries from different markets saying, you know, do you have varieties that will meet specific needs, you know, say for a particular type of noodle, etc. And we have worked with customers, taking a look at whether or not there are opportunities there. They have not come to fruition, partly because, as what Pattie says, it's really expensive to do a segregation for relatively small amounts. However, if you look at an example of where a customer is looking for very specific specifications and is able to meet the market needs, Warburton's is, I think, a real success story in terms of contracting the varieties that they need, controlling the system in terms of shipments when it needs to arrive in the UK, and that's where, you know, we've got some really good quality varieties going into Warburton's bread in the UK, and Warburton's is probably the best known name in terms of quality in the UK, and if not the largest, one of the largest bakers. So it's possible, but it's expensive, and it takes a lot of work to meet specifications. That's not to say that most customers aren't asking for additional specifications on shipments, but in terms of very specific qualities, it's doable, but it's not that common.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add or just expand on is, of course, just because a customer is saying, I would like something, you know, I would like 15.5% protein, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're willing to pay for it. And doesn't necessarily mean that they're willing to cover that extra cost of segregation and the extra cost of moving a identity preserved product to market. So if the cost of sampling and testing and shipping an IP product comes down, then the possibilities of those do increase. But you know, there really does have to be a significant bump in price before large volumes of that kind of niche product really becomes viable.
Thank you. Any questions? Have Mike will travel.
We do know some of you, so we're going to pick on you if you don't.
Thanks. Quick question, or maybe it's not a quick question, about what I observe, I guess, is increasing market sensitivity to glyphosate. And if that's going to be an ongoing trend, and if that eventually becomes removed from producers' toolboxes, what question is, what industry work is going to be taking place to increase farmers' management and awareness of green seed, and what, you know, harvest timing and when you can harvest to push that front end, especially in an environment where September snows and those kind of things are a reality. So what's industry going to do to help growers manage that green seed so they can get it that's not permanently green and versus it will be locked in, those kind of questions?
So that's a really good question, and actually, you know, would refer back to my opening comments about that increased scrutiny from the market is probably going to be one of our biggest challenges going forward, and what's on the farm really does matter. So when it comes to glyphosate, yes, there is increased scrutiny around the world, and that goes beyond the science-based levels that you know, governments are saying is acceptable. And so as producers need to do all the things you can to minimize those residues, and that starts with following the label. Glyphosate is not a desiccant. It's not shouldn't be applied when the crop is still green or maturing. The label indicates that it only should be applied after the crop is fully mature, and you know, that's 30% moisture, and for fall weed control, and it's very effective at that. And that is a message that we just need to keep getting out to producers. And you ask how? The Keep It Clean program, and if you go onto the website keepingitclean.ca, is an example of some of the work that the industry is doing to come together to get that message out to producers. It's a collaborative effort between Cereals Canada, the Canola Council, and Pulse Canada, really focusing on what are those market access issues that that might limit our ability to sell our product, not just internationally, but to our domestic customers as well, and what can farmers do to minimize those issues. Glyphosate is one of those. Yes, there is increased scrutiny, and yes, it's something that we really do need to pay attention to. So keepingitclean.ca is a place to start for some of that outreach to producers.
Okay. Yeah, just to clarify, my second part of the question there was, just like the canola industry did a lot of work with growers about what the appropriate time to harvest canola, but like not too mature to maximize yields, whatever else. On the cereal side, if let's say I pull or glyphosate right out of my toolbox altogether, I don't do anything in the fall, I still need to know a little bit better than when I can harvest that green seed before it's locked in. What stage can I harvest green seed that's still going to mature in the bin versus. That's kind of my question.
Oh, that's I don't have the answer to that technical question. Sorry about that. But just in reference to glyphosate is it shouldn't be going on any green seed. So it should only be applied when the product or when the seed is fully mature. But as far as helping seeds mature in the bin through aeration and those kinds of practices, I don't really have a precise answer to that.
Could I just ask a question kind of related to that as well? Do you foresee us being able to use, I'm right here, to be able to use glyphosate as a pre-harvest tool in the near future, in the next 5 years? Do you think that it'll still be in place, or do you think a time will come where it'll be removed altogether?
I think the answer to that question is if we really do get the message out on ensuring that the product is used correctly, that it's not being used as a desiccant, that it is being used pre-harvest for weed control, only being applied when the crop is fully mature, then I think the answer to that question is yes. I think we can continue to have that tool in our toolbox. But if that doesn't happen, again, this is a product that has increased scrutiny around the world, and if residues increase, then yes, there is going to be pressure on it.
Questions? Where? Sorry. Okay, sorry. We should have had a couple of mics, obviously. Where?
I don't know if this is the right question for you guys, but any hope of getting higher wheat prices in the next 3 or 4 months?
There's always hope.
I don't think any of the three of us have got the marketing background, but Cam wants to comment.
I will comment a little bit. I'm not going to tell you the price, but there's always hope, of course. But right now we're seeing extremely strong demand for spring wheat. Durum is a different question, of course. But for spring wheat, we're seeing very, very strong demand going into China. That's related to the trade issues between the U.S. and China, as well as a drought in Australia. We're going to see growth in demand in Japan because of the CPTPP. There's not going to be a whole lot of wheat left in Western Canada when we get to this end of the crop year. So I can say that the demand for spring wheat in Canadian spring wheat is extremely strong. When does that impact prices? I'll leave that to you and your elevator company. But the demand right now for high quality Canadian wheat is very, very strong.
So I've got a question, if I could. As we've been noticing here recently throughout the time of value creation and the consultations by AFC and CFIA, I wanted to ask the opinion of the commissioner from the Canadian Grain Commission. Most specifically, is we're seeing demotions of varieties in the CWRS category moved into the northern red spring category. And it seems to be concerning to Western Canadian farmers that both aspects are occurring at the same time. We're losing our opportunities for old varieties to be grown on our farms without a possibility of a royalty, while at the same time facing a risk that we will have royalties imposed on us by new value creation through seed synergy as well. So if you could comment.
Well, Cam might have some comments on the value creation aspect of that, but in terms of looking at the quality and the classification of wheat and the shifting of some of those varieties into a new class, that whole process started quite some time ago. And there was very extensive consultation with the industry about what needed to be looked at, and quite a long review process and evaluation with the scientists and discussion with the industry before those final decisions were made. And we really hope to give lots of time for people to be able to make those decisions. So,
right, Pattie, if I could though, as we continue forward then, is there an opportunity for the Canadian Grain Commission to slow down the rate of demotion until we recognize what actually will be come to fruition from the value creation consultations, just to give farmers an opportunity to keep growing those varieties in the meantime while we see how the rest of it shakes out without demotion?
well, you're not stopped from growing those varieties. They're just classified differently now.
And you know where I'm going to go. Of course,
Yeah.
it's at a different price. So
Yeah.
for fairness for the farmers, we want to recognize that they should stay as a CWRS variety, garnering that certain value out of the marketplace instead of having to accept a lower value for the same variety just because CGC has decided to demote it otherwise. And I understand all the rationale that you said should exist for the demotion, but the two occurring at the same time are problematic for Western Canadian farmers. And one might trip up the availability of the second one, right?
Yeah, I understand, but again, you know, when we've embarked on a process quite some time ago and done the evaluations and made those decisions. So I don't think it's really appropriate for us to go backwards and revoke those decisions. And the other thing I'd point out is just to remember why we embarked on that process in the first place. And that was concerns from our customers about the quality of the grain and some differences that they were seeing. So maybe I'll turn it to JoAnne or Cam.
I think it would be very difficult to move those varieties back into CWRS from a customer's point of view, because it is about the gluten quality and it's about the strength. CWRS is really unique, and that's why customers want it, because it has strength and extensibility. And we were seeing the varieties, and we were getting customer complaints from around the world that it was getting too weak. And so, you know, what the CGC did was a very logical, methodical review of those varieties to remove them. And it's made a difference, and we hear that from customers. And they say, yes, the gluten quality, the strength is good. Don't go too low, don't go too high, maintain it right where it is. So that's kind of the background in terms of why they were removed, and it would be, I think it would put us at risk to move those varieties back into CWRS.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily saying that they should be brought back. Those that have occurred already, it could stop at that point and have a more thorough, even a time period where we can catch our breath. Because from a farm perspective, as a grower, if we do look at new varieties coming forward and they are royalties imposed upon them, we want to make sure that we have an availability to us to grow an older variety that still suits our needs. And as much as the buyer or the miller might say that it doesn't necessarily meet the gluten strength it requires today because it's blending, that may be their problem because they're blending too aggressively.
So just for clarification, this isn't an ongoing process, so it's done. Like there isn't going to be varieties that are being reclassified next year or the year after. The process is complete.
No?
Are there, oh,
Just,
yeah.
just to further that, I understand what you're saying, that the new varieties that are coming out, the variety testing system has been changed to ensure that the new varieties coming forward have got that gluten strength, so that there won't be any new varieties that the Commission will be looking at classification, because the process was done on those varieties.
Yeah, for
Hello?
the old varieties, the process is done.
Oh, he wants the new varieties back.
So will Brandon
Brandon.
get demoted?
Brandon. That's yours.
All I can say is right now the process is complete.
Hello, my name is Ian Robson. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask a further question that was discussion was started by the farmer over on this side here about glyphosate. There's a researcher at at the Swift Current Research Station who has noticed a link between the use of glyphosate and increased fusarium in wheat and cereal kernels. And we have oat millers who don't want any treatment of glyphosate, barley maltsters who don't want that in the seeds. We have concerns by consumers about gluten, but I'm thinking that if there's increased levels of glyphosate in the seed, it's probable that people are worried about the glyphosate rather than the gluten. And I don't think anybody is spending research to adequately answer that question. And if we don't ask the question and we don't investigate it, then we're not really being scientific. And we're talking about a scientific researcher who has pointed this out. And I'm very glad that the industry is concerned about this, because we were harvesting our crops using swathers or waiting until it was entirely mature and then straight cutting. And so consumers should be assured that farmers can deliver a quality product, and indeed we should deliver quality product. I'm very troubled when I heard my neighbor this past August being asked if he was ready to harvest his wheat, and his answer was, "I've got to desiccate it and then I can go." So I think you really are grasping at straws, Cam, if you want to try to depend on Clean Farm and a message. This is about farmers and exactly how we react as individual farmers. And it is true, we have a global grain system, and we need to respect that. Every one of us is part of that. But we need to do a much better job of working together as farmers. And we have to really work together.
So Ian, I agree with you on that need to work together, and it is critically important. And that message that yes, every farmer in this room is part of a global grain system, and what you do on your farm really does matter, and that is an important message. To the research around glyphosate, I think I'm just going to go back to Health Canada 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, where Health Canada came out and announced a review of its review of glyphosate. And I think a comment that really did stick in my mind is we left no stone unturned in investigating the safety of this product, and that it is safe. And it's, not, of course, not just Health Canada that has that opinion, but it's the Australian Regulatory Agency, it's the EPA, it's the European Food Safety Authority, it's the European Chemical Authority. Over 160 countries have authorized this product and investigated it, and there's no risk and risk-based health agency in the world that considers the product a risk. That does not mean we don't have an issue, because yes, it has become a focus of activist community. So this is a product that has been very, very extensively researched, and I don't think we can we shouldn't make light of that. And we also need to really recognize what modern agriculture is doing from a sustainability perspective. And again, every grain farmer in this room has a wonderful sustainability story to tell. And that's being delivered by modern agriculture. Our soils are healthier than they were 30 years ago. And that's not something that's, anecdotal. There's research to back that up, that the soil organic matter is increasing significantly. It retains water better, less susceptible to erosion. We're using less fuel. This is because of modern agriculture, and glyphosate is a key part of that toolbox. And I don't think as an industry or as farmers we need to be shy about talking about our sustainability message and what modern agriculture has allowed us to do. We do need to use those products properly, and we do need to use them according to the label, and that is a critically important message for farmers to register on, and a critically important message to ensure that we are going to have these tools available to us going forward. Now, to your question about a correlation between fusarium and glyphosate use. Boy, I get awfully uncomfortable when I hear things like correlations without having any causal and effect responses behind that. So I don't have the benefit of seeing that research, but correlation does not mean cause and effect, and that is just a critically important thing to keep in mind. You can have a correlation between many things, or an apparent correlation. Does not mean that correlation happens over time or is sustained over time, and it doesn't mean cause and effect. So I get really nervous when I just hear correlation without accompanying data on cause and effect, and I haven't seen that.
No, don't have it.
Yes. Thanks, Cam. I get very uncomfortable with correlation as well, but when you talk about every stone being turned over to investigate this scientifically, and yet there's no money being spent on this, that's what's the trouble. And this researcher has demonstrated this, and it needs to be really looked at, and we have to really satisfy the needs of our consumers. That's why we're here. And if we're going to hide from research, consumers don't like that. And I don't like that either as a farmer. And I know that the life in the soil is what makes the organic matter work. And when you put a poison like glyphosate that kills the bacteria, and then the life in the soil, you're not increasing the life in the soil, you're actually decreasing it. And if you load the soil life so that it doesn't favor healthy plants, then you have a different soil structure. And there's been a lot of work done about this by David Montgomery and other researchers, and we can't hide from that, and we can't say we're doing the best we can. We've got to look at it and tackle it. And the same excuses were made about DDT back in the 60s, that, oh yeah, it's safe and can't worry about it. Well, time moves on. And time is going to move on from today. And how are we going to look today if we said, well, we didn't really look into the issue, oh, oops, down the road? And I don't want to be casting dispersions, but I think we need to ask the questions. So that's important. Cam?
I don't disagree with you that we shouldn't ask questions. We should always be willing to ask questions. But, you know, as far as soil health, again, we do have that research that, you know, our soils, especially in Western Canada, have never been healthier. Or never been healthier as long as they've been farmed. You know, there is significant research in that. So we really do have a good news story to tell on that front.
Thank you. Curtis Sims from McGregor. Just a quick aside on research worldwide. Scientific reporting is that the whole system of peer review has substantially deteriorated worldwide. It's a big issue in terms of all these things. So whenever you're reviewing some sort of a science thing and it pops up in the press, view it with some skepticism until it actually is repeated and properly reviewed and so on, because a lot of stuff floats out that, as you well expressed, Mr. Daul, there might be coincidental relationships, but not cause and effect. It's the new age of superstition, is the way I'm coining it with what you see. That's what we're dealing with as agriculturalists. My real question is much more specific in terms of wheat, and I might have missed something. My apologies, I was a few minutes late. I was detained, but, well, voluntarily detained. Anyway, wheat grading. We established with the Faller and Prospers, the DNSs, a new grade structure to accommodate a desire on farmers to grow these varieties. It was working out. My history goes back long enough to the days of semi-dwarf wheats coming in and the whole thing. So, but anyway, my point is that was probably a wise thing to do from my perspective as a farmer as well. However, it does expose in the process a weakness, like how many little slots do we try and make? If there's another variety comes in, another grouping comes in, it exposes a problematic approach. Somewhere we need to have more of a systematic approach in terms of measuring qualities and allowing the trade more maneuvering room. A little bit of an example is the Red Spring wheat. Before with the wheat board days, I won't start a long debate on that, but the point is that they used to have a big spread, but now the real market, the cash market, is saying that between a 1 and a 2, it's 10 cents, maybe only a nickel. And before we used to all hung up on whether it's a 1 or a 2, and nobody cares, you know. So there's an example of where we're too rich, we're too whatever. So just my little concluding question is, in your wheat grading parameters, and maybe 25 items, 6 or 8 of them are related to something like we don't want another mad cow disease in wheat by sending something with some real toxins. Okay, that's valid, you know, that's really valid. But from there, maybe we should let the customer decide what their standards are for mildew or for this or that and what they want to pay, and come up with a quantifiable measure. Maybe the commission is the measurer of record, or maybe you license some labs to do it. Here's what's in it. But the whole grade structure and all the classes, like, it's just exploding to, there's way too many. So now you blend everything together anyway at the elevators because there's not enough bins. So somewhere we need to look at what we're doing in that basis. Thank you.
Thanks, Curtis. It's nice to see you again. It's a good question, and I think part of it I touched on when I talked about the increasing complexities of the relationships that we've got in the industry today. You know, we had a system developed where we could visually identify wheat and its quality, and it was efficient and effective to move it through the system that way. People could understand what they were getting paid for and what they were selling. And now we've got more science. We've got more measurements we can take. We've got different understandings of quality. and people need to be willing to pay for that quality. It's as JoAnne and Cam said before, you know, there's no point in having a whole bunch of different qualities out there if farmers aren't going to get paid for them. But I think we're right in the midst of that process. What can we quickly, easily, and cost-effectively measure that's meaningful to our customers and meaningful to the farmers? And it's going to be an ongoing conversation. It's not going to be a switch that's flipped overnight. But I hear you. I understand what you're saying.
And I think if you think about what the Commission has been doing and the changes that they made to the mildew tolerances, looking at how did that impact the end use of the product and whether or not there were issues, and they were able to essentially pull back on the mildew. So, I mean, from the customer's perspective, what they're looking for in a grade or in a specification is something that they know what they're going to get at the end and the predictability.
I'm going to use Ian's words, and it's always good to ask questions, and we need to always be willing to ask questions. And I think these are questions we do need to ask and have that look at, does our current system, is it meeting the needs of farmers and is it meeting the needs of customers? It has to meet both. We really do have two customers. It's farmers are one customer, and you know, the mills in Japan are another sets of customers. The mills in Nigeria are another customers, and we need to meet the needs of both of those. So yes, we need to ask those questions, and we need to ask the questions, you know, is it the same for all the classes of wheat, or is there a difference? I can say with a great deal of confidence that Canadian Western Red Spring is a differentiated product in the world market, you know, we do have different market access. We do have different prices because of the quality attributes of Canadian Western Red Spring. The same is true for Durham as well. That's going to show. There was an earlier question about prices, and you're going to see a little bit of that differentiation in empty bins this year because of the high demand for that. But we always need to be asking those questions and ensuring that the approach that we're using is meeting the needs of our customers. It's meeting the needs of farmers, and allowing us to get to that grain into market in a cost-effective and reliable way.
If I could just add one thing too, it's not the Canadian Grain Commission sitting in isolation making all of these decisions. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got an organization that does decide. But we do so with a lot of consultation. We've got Western Standards and Eastern Standards committees that are made up of grain companies, of farmers, of people in the value chain, where we're able to discuss all of those issues and try and come up with the appropriate grades and standards.
This has just flown by. We've been here for 45 minutes. So unfortunately, I have to cut things short because I believe we could probably go on for another half hour if we had that time. Unfortunately, we don't. Please join me in thanking Cam, JoAnne, and Pattie for joining us this afternoon. I think the information that they shared is invaluable, and obviously as Manitoba Wheat and Barley Growers Association, we work closely with each of those three entities as well. So we will continue to collaborate and work together with them as we make wheat profitable for producers. So once again, thank you.